The Denver Broncos now begin their preparation for the Las Vegas Raiders, but a big bombshell has impacted this matchup from a preparation standpoint, not maybe by the Denver Broncos, but also by the Las Vegas Raiders as Jon Gruden resigned on Monday. How does this impact both the Denver Broncos and the Las Vegas Raiders prep for Sunday? And does it make the matchup a must-win for the Denver Broncos? Sayre, Bedinger, myself, we break it down in today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Broncos country? Welcome back into a brand new episode, Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast here on the Locked On NFL Network, your team every day from the South Stands to the end zone. I'm your host, as always, Cody Roark, joined alongside by co-host Sayre Bedinger. Both of us, we cover the Denver Broncos for the Locked On NFL Network and 9 News. Make sure you follow this podcast and subscribe on your favorite audio podcasting platforms. Not to mention, if you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications so you never miss out on any action Denver Broncos related every single day all year long. We have you covered. Sayre, my friend, oh my goodness, what a crazy 24 hours. Look, the Broncos begin their preparation here for the Las Vegas Raiders, but one of the biggest attributes about this Raiders football team is their offense under the mind and under the leadership of Jon Gruden. He has now resigned effective on Monday night, and now this impacts, I think, how we view this game. I mean, how you doing, my man? But this is just, it was a crazy Monday night.
It really was, Cody. You know, I decided on Monday night to kind of skip watching football for a bit and just hang out with family, hang out with the wife. And so to pull up my phone after all that and getting ready for bed and stuff to see that Jon Gruden resigned, Lamar Jackson came back from a 19-point deficit. I mean, it was kind of a whirlwind and just in terms of the NFL news and the NFL world coming about, but it's crazy. It's just absolutely nuts to see the things that have been going on, and especially with Jon Gruden as we prepare for Raiders week number 1 as far as the Denver Broncos are concerned. It's going to be fascinating to see, how does that Raiders team respond to this? How much does Derek Carr really have control when we're talking about, running the offense at the line of scrimmage, making checks, calling audibles, doing those types of things? We'll see how much autonomy he really has and how well he really knows this offense. But you're absolutely right. I mean, the Raiders, they're an offensive football team. They've been making waves these last couple of years. They beat the Kansas City Chiefs last year. They've won some big games this year already. They've been making waves based on the way that team has really responded to Jon Gruden calling the offense and the pieces coming together. So without Gruden in the mix, I think it has a huge effect on this game.
Well, see how much of it really changes too. And we talk about it, play calling too. Jon Gruden is the play caller on the offensive side of the ball here. So Vic Fangio, you're still going to see a lot of 3 wide receiver sets, 3-by-1. Sometimes you're going to see quads, and you have to figure out, how am I going to cover Hunter Renfrow, Darren Waller? Talk about Henry Ruggs, Brian Edwards. They have so many guys that can contribute as receiving threats. It's really hard to pinpoint, how do you just stop one guy? You have to account for everybody, because you can lock up one side, but one guy could absolutely hurt you. But that was what Jon Gruden's offense did. So for me, I know we're going to get insight this week on our crossover Thursday episode with your boy Q, host of Locked On Raiders. But man, from a preparation standpoint, going back and watching the Bears versus Raiders game, Sayre, the Raiders looked absolutely distracted. And obviously we know what had happened. The emails had leaked out, and obviously Jon Gruden, that's exactly why he resigned. He said a lot of things that are inappropriate. They're very insensitive to a lot of people, and it's simply not okay. And now it came back, and he's held accountable for it. So they lose a big grip on this. And if they have a play caller too, this is what I'm more interested in, and maybe how it impacts the Broncos prep, is who is going to be the offensive play caller now for this football team. It's going to be the QB coach. It's going to be the new interim head coach. I mean, I'm not sure at this point, but one thing I can tell you, how those guys call offenses might be different than how Jon Gruden does. Even though it's the same stuff, the flow of it matters ultimately, Sayre. And that was something we were hoping to talk with our man Tim Jenkins about on today's episode of the show, but he's in Disney World with his family celebrating. So, hey, have fun. We get Tim Jenkins back next week. Man, I tell you what, Sayre, this is an interesting dynamic to Broncos Raiders preparation week here. Obviously, the Broncos back on the practice field on Wednesday at the UCL Training Center to beginning the preparation stage for this, and hopefully they can get some guys back from injury. But I think this poses a bigger question. When you look at what's going on with the Las Vegas Raiders, the roster hasn't changed. The coaching has. Does this make Sunday a must-win for the Denver Broncos? Because I've already seen it on Twitter. A lot of Broncos fans are saying there is no reason that the Broncos should not win this game on Sunday. Like I said, there's so many different things that play into it, but I'm eager for your thoughts on the subject.
Absolutely. The Broncos are favored in this game, I believe, by 3.5 points, something like that, depending on what sports betting site you use or what you look at. But of course, in that case, it's really just a home field advantage type of thing. They're saying Broncos by 3.5. That's home field advantage, despite the fact you lost 2 straight games. I agree, Cody. This is a must-win game for the Denver Broncos. We've already touched on the fact in previous shows the Broncos have now lost 2 straight games against 2 key AFC opponents that are going to play a factor down the stretch of this season. You have, those 2 tiebreakers, so to speak, already going against you if you're looking at potential, 6-7 seed situation, assuming, of course, the Broncos don't win the AFC West, which, as the way they're playing right now, I have a hard time believing they're going to do that. So I think this does become a must-win game, and you hate to really pile on the Raiders with things that are going on off the field. Of course, we want to be sensitive to that, but at the same time, this is the Broncos don't really have time to worry about that from their perspective. They have to take care of business on the field, and for the Raiders, you've got to kick this opponent while they're down. They've also lost a couple games here in recent weeks, and that's that speaks to the way that the parity in this league, the parity in the AFC West right now. Early on, it looked like the Raiders might be one of the best teams in the division. Now they've shown some signs of weakness as a football team on the field. We'll see how coaching affects it. We've talked about this too, Cody. The fact that Pat Shurmur and the way that he's been calling plays has affected the way the Broncos have played. So without your play caller for the Raiders context, without your play caller, how much does that affect? And I was about to say, how badly does that affect, assuming that it's going to be negative, but I mean, we don't know. So we've seen for the Denver Broncos, it has been somewhat of a negative when you're talking about game flow, game operation from the offensive coordinator perspective. And I think that makes this a must-win game. A veteran defensive coordinator, Vic Fangio, and I call him defensive coordinator because he's effectively the Broncos head coach and defensive coordinator or defensive play caller. But, he's got to take advantage. Just like he does against rookie quarterbacks, you've got to take advantage against a team in the Raiders who's missing their play caller, the guy that's been calling plays for the last 3 years.
Yeah, it's going to be a big key to watch. And Broncos country, eager for your thoughts on how the impact of Jon Gruden's resignation with the Las Vegas Raiders, how it impacts your perception of Sunday's upcoming game for the Denver Broncos against them in AFC West Divisional Showdown. But coming up here in just a moment, Broncos country, Sayre and myself, we're going to talk about the Broncos offense by the numbers. There are some really good things, but then there's a couple of things that are puzzling that are going to make you scratch your head and say, what the heck is going on? We'll get to that coming up here in just a moment. But before we do that, let me tell you about the sponsor of today's episode of the show. It's your friends over there at Get Upside, and you never have to pay full price at the gas pump ever again when you download the free Get Upside app in the Google Play Store or your favorite phone app store, whatever you have. Get Upside is available there. And what you can do is when you sign up today, you can use promo code Touchdown, and that's going to get you an additional 25 cents per gallon cash back today. Whereas when it's your first time using and you use promo code Touchdown, it's going to get you 50 cents total per gallon cash back on your first tank fill up today. And you can get that 25 cents every single time you go to the gas pump and you fill up. So if you travel as often as I do and you're getting a lot of gas, and depending on where prices are at in different parts of the states, the country, you want to have the Get Upside app because it helps negate a little bit of that impact. And it puts money directly back in your bank account because you can link your bank account, you can link your PayPal, or you can even connect it to Amazon or other gift cards. And it's easy for you to cash out. So once again, make sure you use promo code Touchdown when you sign up at the free Get Upside app today to get your 50% per gallon cash back today when you sign up. The Get Upside app. All right, Sayre, jumping into the third quarter action. Today's episode, Lockdown Broncos. Just want to give a shout out to Broncos country. Thank you for making Lockdown Broncos your first listen of the day. It would mean the world to both Sayre and myself if you would hit that subscribe or follow button. If you haven't done so already, we aim to keep you covered all year long with everything Denver Broncos news, content, and coverage related here on the Locked On NFL Network. But Sayre, look, we were talking before we went on the show here. We're talking about the Broncos offense through 5 weeks of the NFL season. There are some really interesting numbers that, paint a good picture for this team, especially on the offensive side of the ball. But when you look at the outcome and the actual results, it's very, very baffling. Do you care to share this information with Broncos country?
Definitely, Cody. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, and I'm just the messenger here. But this is obviously something that was masked in the first 3 games of the season based on the fact that the Broncos were winning, based on the fact that they were finding ways to score the ball anyway. But man, to be 5 weeks into the season, 5 games into the season, and to be dead last in the NFL, Cody, in third down conversion rate, 28.6%. That's an absolutely unacceptable figure for the Denver Broncos. And you compound that with the fact that they've also only scored 8 touchdowns on 19 red zone trips. That's really, really, really bad. And that's good for 29th in the NFL. So thankfully, they're not the worst in the NFL in that regard, but they're very close. In the top 4 worst teams in red zone and the number 1 worst team in the league in third down conversion rate. And what makes that even more frustrating is this next stat. The Broncos are number 1 in the NFL. Number 1 in opponent starting field position. The average is around the 22, 23-yard line every opponent starting drive for the Denver Broncos through 5 games. And they're 4th in the league, starting at roughly the 30-31. So they're getting good field position. They're getting in good field position situations defensively, yet they can't convert third downs and they can't convert red zone opportunities into touchdowns. It's insanely frustrating to watch this unfold on a week-to-week basis. I'm an Iowa Hawkeyes fan. I know what frustrating offense looks like, but hey, the Hawkeyes are still winning games. The Denver Broncos, however, have dropped 2 straight games. So I think, Cody, these are the big things to me that the team, the offense specifically, has to address this week. Situational football, third down, red zone, those type of things, they have to emphasize it in a big way.
Yeah, well, not to mention urgency as well. But, here's the puzzling thing too, Sayre, because in those first 3 matchups against the Giants, against the Jaguars, and against the Jets, the Broncos didn't face many third and long, third and medium situations. They were all third and short, and they still weren't converting because for some reason on third and short, they're throwing the ball downfield past 15 to 20 yards. And then the last couple of weeks, the story has been 3rd and 10, 3rd and 11, 3rd and 15, 3rd and 12. How many times do we see the Broncos backed up on a really third and long manageable situation? And what comes with that too is because, yes, Teddy Bridgewater on those plays, he threw it shorter than the line of scrimmage. And that's really a lot based on how defenses play, but also for him wanting to get the ball out of his hands quickly. Does it, maybe can he take a couple shots? Absolutely. When you go back and you watch the film, you see certain things. But you know what NFL defenses do when it's 3rd and 15? They're going to play cover 4. They're going to play their safeties and they're going to play their corners back. They're going to play them off coverage in front of the sticks, protecting it. That way they allow something to be thrown short. They rally and they tackle. Everybody's getting deeper depth there. So it's forcing you to throw the ball short, and then they're going to come up and rally and tackle you. And that's if you break down and you have good discipline as a defense that you make those plays. But for the reality is, I know everybody wants the Broncos. A lot of people want them to run 4 verts. They want them to run all these different plays that are going to test downfield. You have to look at a lot of it based on coverage. Against cover 4, those vertical long routes, unless you have a one-on-one matchup that you really, really like, but when you're going against zone, it's super hard. So you can see maybe why, like if you're facing a 3rd and 15 and you get 9 or 10 yards on it and you're 5 yards short, I want people to kind of urge away from saying, oh my goodness, it's a check down. Well, yeah, you have to take what the defense gives you in that situation, because if you hold the ball too long in a cover 4 situation, 3rd and long, and you get sacked, that could be the difference between taking you out of field goal range or giving you an opportunity to kick a field goal, at least get some points on the board. So I'd like to see the Broncos improve their philosophy on third down. And Sayre, goes all the way back to what we were talking about on yesterday's episode of the show. This is where Pat Shurmur has to adapt or evolve. And look, I know we talked about coaching and culture yesterday, but Vic Fangio had even said in Monday's press conference, he says, I have no qualms with Pat outside of the fact that the offensive unit has to play better. And it's like, okay, well, now that is said, how much of that is going to put pressure on Pat Shurmur to rectify some of these changes? You and I talked about it. It feels like the scheme for the offense is fit around what Pat Shurmur wants to run versus what the players are actually comfortable with, not to their strengths. They're forcing the players to fit to the scheme rather than the scheme to the players. And I think that's a very, very strong observation. Now, this is where I really wish we had Tim Jenkins this week to be able to go over that. But Sayre, in your opinion here, do you feel like the pressure is mounting right now on Pat Shurmur specifically? Because I get it. We are 5 weeks through the NFL season. We're on to week 6. And now there is potential talk and there is urgency too. Broncos media too, newspapers, outlets, they're calling for Pat Shurmur to be let go by the Broncos, by Vic Fangio. And this is obviously a big talking point.
Yeah, there's huge pressure on Pat Shurmur right now. And I wonder what behind closed doors those conversations are like, because we don't really get to see that in the public eye. We know that Vic Fangio will speak his mind when he's got something on his mind, but he said everything he needed to say by saying he has no problems with Pat Shurmur, except the offense needs to be better. And that's absolutely correct. He needs to be better at game management, calling plays, the flow of the game, understanding defensive weaknesses and tendencies. It seems like right now Pat Shurmur is playing into defensive strengths, which is difficult to assume that he's actively trying to do that. Of course, he's not necessarily trying to do that, but man, it would be great to see every once in a while as the pass rush, against the Baltimore Ravens specifically was getting home plenty. It would have been great to see a few more running back screens or maybe a few more quick hitting pass plays. I just saw a stat today, Cody, that said Courtland Sutton leads the NFL in air yards per passing attempt thrown into his direction. Okay, that's great. But at the same time, Pat Shurmur, like you mentioned, he's dialing up these vertical passing plays to players like Courtland Sutton, Tim Patrick, David Moore even got a deep target in the most recent loss against the Steelers. He's dialing up these long passing plays in low percentage situations, and I can't stress that enough. I've said that on multiple shows before, but for anybody listening for the first time, thank you for listening. But also, I think that's become a big problem as Pat Shurmur's trying to dial up too many long passes. He's not taking those shorter passing plays, those quicker hitting passing plays in the early downs when the Broncos have an opportunity to gain yards after the catch. Another thing, I'm going to continue beating that drum until we start to see it, because even in Carolina, we saw Teddy Bridgewater really make, career years for guys like Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore, other players in that offense in terms of gaining yards after the catch. And that's just something that we're not seeing this year with the Denver Broncos, and specifically guys like Noah Fant, who's been one of the best in the NFL since he came into the league at gaining yards after the catch. The pressure is on Pat Shurmur big time, not only to get your playmakers involved in the game earlier, not only to score earlier, but man, you've got to be much more efficient. You've got a quarterback that's completing nearly 70% of his passes, and you're last in the league in third down conversion rate. That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't equate, and it's something that has to change right away.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think the pressure is mounting, and obviously a big performance by the Broncos offense this week could be huge. And look, that Raiders defense is tougher than they have been in the last couple of seasons. Yannick Ngakoue, I mean, you even have different guys like Trevon Moehrig stepping up. You have different guys like Max Crosby, who's just really come on into his own here. And not to mention you have a variety of different linebackers. The Broncos struggled against that last year. So you're going to have to understand there's going to be a lot of pressure. It's going to be a four-man defensive front. That pressure is going to be coming after you. I think the one benefit could be that, they're banged up right now in the secondary at the cornerback position. So there is no excuse why the Broncos can't test some of these short passes, these situations that will create some yak. And if you're going against a blitz-happy team that goes a lot of man coverage, do what the Pittsburgh Steelers did against the Denver Broncos. Quick passes, out routes, sit routes, whatever you can, and then allow guys to make plays with the ball in their hand. It's easier, I know, Sayre, from us to be able to say it, and I understand the game flow thing as a coordinator, but this is where Pat Shurmur and his veteran experience as a play caller, it has to come in handy. It has to be what the Broncos gambled on letting Rich Scangarello go a few years ago. But Broncos country, let us know your thoughts on that down below here on the offensive side of the ball. What do you think about the Broncos obviously being one of the number one offenses or one of the top 5 offenses in average starting field position for them, but their failure to convert in the red zone and on third down is something that is holding them back in a big way. We're going to talk about the defense coming up here in just a moment, but before we do that, let me tell you about the other sponsor. Today's episode, Lockdown Broncos, our good friends over there at Built Bar, the best tasting protein bar on the market. I had just went through an entire box of Churro Puff Built Bar, and Sayre, my friend, I had to order another one, and I used promo code LOCK15, and it got me 15% off my order, and they ship it very, very fast. It gets to my place quickly within a couple of days of ordering it. And look, I always just look forward to it, right? That cinnamon churro type flavor with chocolate, but even better, the texture, it's like marshmallow based. So it's like biting into a cloud. I know you like the Churro Puff Marshmallow Built Bar, but my friend, Broncos country, we need to get you on the train of that as well. And you can get your hands on a box of Built Bar today by going to Built.com. You can see all the amazing flavors that they have, including the Churro Puff Built Bar. For a limited time only, it will be available there. And it's also the healthiest protein bar on the market. 17 grams of protein, 130 calories, and only 4 grams of sugar. So make sure you and your family get your hands on a box of Built Bar today by going to Built.com. Once again, promo code LOCK15 is going to get you 15% off at Built.com. All right, Sayre, jump into the fourth quarter action. Today's episode, Lockdown Broncos. Just want to give a mile-high salute to everybody in Broncos country for listening to this podcast. It would mean the world to both Sayre and myself. If you love Lockdown Broncos, please go to Apple Podcasts, write us a review, leave your Twitter handle in that review, and you'll be entered into a contest giveaway for a Broncos jersey. We're just about 100 subscribers on YouTube away from 5K. We're going to be doing a jersey giveaway of anybody's choice. Whatever player you want on the Denver Broncos, we'll get it for you. We'll get it sent to your house. Thank you so much for supporting Lockdown Broncos. But Sayre, Now, we focused on the offensive side of the ball in the last segment. Now, I wanted to take a look here at the defensive side of the ball, and you had a great idea. You said, hey, Cody, you know what we should do? Let's reshuffle the starting defense here for the Denver Broncos. And I said, you know what? That's a great idea, right? When things aren't working, you got to look at what's not working. And can you maybe remove some of those pieces that aren't working? Can you add a couple of pieces in? So let's start off in the secondary. Obviously, this is probably the most evident one, right? Is this the week that the Broncos bench Kyle Fuller? If, in fact, Ronald Darby is healthy, do you imagine or do you hope that they put Ronald Darby as the starting cornerback in base opposite of Patrick Surtain over Kyle Fuller?
I really do hope so. Kyle Fuller has pretty consistently been the weak link in that defense. And I think, look, you got to make that decision. You've got to make that decision, that tough call to bench a guy that you signed, one of the higher priced free agents you brought in, a guy that you brought in with his familiarity of the defensive scheme and all those different things, played for Vic Fangio back in Chicago, had the all-pro season, one of the best playmakers in the league in terms of passes defense, getting his hands on the ball. Unfortunately, the ball has been missing Kyle Fuller, and it's been landing in the hands of the opposing receiver for some big plays over the course of the first 5 weeks of the season. I think any other player on the team, and there's precedence for this last year with Michael Ojemudia getting put in the starting lineup and then getting taken out. And of course, Kyle Fuller is a veteran, so maybe a little bit different there, but also you do have the benefit of putting another veteran in there, Ronald Darby, where you're not saying, hey, we're going to bench you for another rookie. We're going to bench you for another guy that, has no real playing time or no real resume in the NFL, but we're going to bench you just to bench you. I think the Broncos are in a position where they don't really need Kyle Fuller to kind of get right at this point in time. He could get right in other ways right now while they succeed with another high-priced free agent on the other side of Patrick Surtain. And of course, Bryce Callahan has been locking it down from his nickel spot. So there was a time, Cody, in Vic Fangio's first season as head coach of the Denver Broncos where he did reshuffle the defensive formation. You remember he took Shelby Harris out of the nose tackle spot, put Mike Purcell in that spot, took Josie Jewell out of the starting linebacker spot and put Alexander Johnson in there next to Todd Davis, moved Kareem Jackson back to the safety position. All of those different things really led to a nice little winning streak in the middle of the season, that 2019 campaign for the Broncos, despite their inconsistent quarterback play. So I think there's something to be said for Vic Fangio making a little bit of a shuffle here.
Well, now let's take a look here at some veteran options, Sayre, and look at linebacker. Not saying that the Broncos need to replace anybody. I think Alexander Johnson, he's going to get a lot of gripe from fans until he catches those interceptions. I mean, through the course of his last couple of seasons in Denver, he's had so many passes hit his hands where he could have had an interception. And there's no way of telling, based especially on how the offense was playing, if he comes away with one of those interceptions, who knows how the game would have ended, right? Maybe the Broncos go down and they score. Maybe it's different, right? Or maybe the Broncos turn the ball over the next play. We don't know there. But obviously, it could have been a game-changing play. He had 2 opportunities against the Steelers. He missed out. But maybe a more fresh rotation of linebackers. Look, Baron Browning's starting to come back a little bit more healthy. I know that he was a full participant in Friday's practice last week. Maybe you figure out how to use him as an edge rusher. But at the inside backer position, you go out and you get Avery Williamson. You have Micah Kaiser right now. Maybe you mix those guys in because, look, Justin Sternad, I'm a huge fan of Sternad, but there's some things that he's going through right now, essentially as an NFL rookie in year 2. He never played last year. I think that's impacting him, right? So maybe a boost of having a guy like Avery Williamson in or Micah Kaiser getting some run alongside Alexander Johnson. Maybe that might help a little bit, help take that pressure off of Sternad, but he's also going to need the reps too. I can see the argument for both things, but you have these veterans. Why not use them?
I completely agree. I talked after the game on Sunday against the Steelers about Avery Williamson kind of needing to be fast-tracked. Of course, you sign that guy to the practice squad and everybody thinks, well, he was just signed to the practice squad. What's the big deal? Well, in the NFL right now, you can sign guys like Avery Williamson, a vested NFL veteran with multiple 100-plus tackle seasons. You can sign up to 6 vested veterans to your practice squad. So it's really just a temporary thing for those teams to be signing players like that to the practice squad. At this point in the season, you sign them to the practice squad, you get them ready for regular season action. And I think they kind of preemptively saw maybe this coming with, like you mentioned, Justin Sternad is essentially a rookie. This isn't to say that he can't ever become something. Look, we saw Josie Jewell in his rookie season back in 2018, playing primarily just special teams. Then in year 2, like I just mentioned, he was benched. By years 3 and 4 now, Josie Jewell has established himself as a player that's probably one of the better ones on the Broncos defense, to be honest, and somebody that, like you mentioned on yesterday's show, Cody, they're really missing Josie Jewell. So getting benched at this point in time is not going to be the end of the world for a player like Justin Sternad. And it certainly could benefit the Broncos in a big way, because we know how they like to emphasize stopping the run on the first 2 downs. And Avery Williamson is really, really good in that regard. So I think he could help. Even Micah Kaiser, like you mentioned, Cody, he's been a starter in this league before, and he's excelled in pass coverage. He's an athletic guy who can get out in space, and he played really well in Brandon Staley's defense last season for the Los Angeles Rams. So we'll see what he can do as well. I think he would be an option to potentially come in on the field and maybe replace Alexander Johnson on those passing downs, where obviously Johnson is struggling he's getting in the right place. He's got his hands on the ball 3 times in the last 2 weeks. So we know that he can make plays in coverage. We know that he can get in the right position, but we got to start seeing conversion on those plays. So, and I think you brought up a great one, Cody, another great suggestion of McTelvin Agim potentially taking the place of Shamar Stephen in the rotation.
Yeah, I mean, why not take a look at it right now? Look, there were a couple times where I saw on the All-22, Shamar Stephen just couldn't get off of a block from a center, from a guard, and it looked like sometimes his effort slowed up. There was that big play. Obviously, Justin Sternad had missed the tackle on Najee Harris, but you look at Shamar Stephen, we talk about effort. Now, one thing we always look at as coaches, and I go back to times where I evaluated my defensive players, we'd look at a run play. When the ball is going away from you, are you chasing it, or are you jogging, or are you walking? And there was a couple times where he's walking. And I don't think even coaches like that stuff. I don't think the NFL coaches tolerate that. They want to see guys flying to the football. And look, that's something that the Steelers defense did. Hats off to them. Every single one of their guys, they flew to the football. And that's something maybe that the Broncos got to get back to. You see a few guys in, like maybe 2 or 3 guys on a tackle, but for the Steelers, we saw like 4 or 5, 6 guys get into the action and like try to get to the ball. If there's a pile, then obviously they stop, but they're getting there. You're rallying to the football. It's called pursuit. So you got to work on pursuit drill a little bit. But McTelvin Agim, in my opinion, what we saw a little bit of promise against the Baltimore Ravens, just his motor, it stood out right there, creating penetration, getting his hands up, deflecting a Lamar Jackson pass, who all of a sudden, the last 2 weeks there, Lamar Jackson has been unbelievable. Lamar himself has more all-purpose yards, I think, than most other NFL teams outside of a couple teams above him. Lamar Jackson himself has more offense than I think the rest of the NFL. So I think if he's third, that's nuts. I mean, what he was able to do, he passed for 400 yards in Monday night's win. So he's evolving as a player, obviously, but look, you need another spark, and maybe McTelvin Agim, who's been dominating in training camp and preseason, has been a standout player. Maybe it's his time over this veteran guy, because simply the veteran option right now with Shamar Stephen, in my opinion, Sayre, I don't think it's worked out too much. But with that said, Broncos country, let us know your thoughts on what changes you'd make to the Denver Broncos defensive lineup, the starters right now. If you could take and maybe plug a couple guys in at other places, who would it be? Let us know in the comment section down below on YouTube. But ladies and gentlemen, that will do it for today's episode of Locked On Broncos. Thank you for making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day. For your second listen, go check out the Peacock and Williamson show here on the Locked On NFL Network. Sayre and myself, we're going to be back tomorrow with a brand new episode of the show, a crossover Thursday with your boy Q. He's our boy Q, host of the Locked On Raiders podcast. We're going to preview Sunday's matchup. We're going to get all the inside intel about what the Broncos need to look out for this Sunday against the Raiders. That's on tomorrow's episode, Locked On Broncos.